Have you ever had an idea that worked out so perfectly that even you didn't believe it? That's pretty much the foundation that Airbnb was built upon. The owners were told that their idea was the worst idea anyone could ever have. They thought they'd have to sell cereals for the rest of their lives. Little did they know that they had struck gold right in their home. In this video, we're going to take you along the journey of how Airbnb was founded, and the twists and turns in this story get wild. So let's jump into it. The late 2000s were trying times. The world wasn't as connected as it is today, and, well, if you weren't working a steady job, chances were you weren't making enough to get by. Add to that the cost of living in San Francisco, and you have a disaster on your hands. That's what life was like for Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, who had just picked up their things and moved to San Francisco from New York in 2008. At first, they were able to get by with their savings, but eventually the savings began to run out, and when the rent went up by 25% the following year, Brian decided that something had to be done. Either he'd move out, or they had to come up with a way to make enough money to afford rent. While they were going through that phase of confusion and frustration, they realized the Industrial Design Conference was coming to the city. With that, the one thing consistently on the news was how there were far too many people coming into the city, and barely any hotels at all. Once all of those hotels were booked, and we're talking even the super cheap and shady ones, people were desperate to find a place to sleep at night while they were there. That sounded like at least a sliver of hope for Brian and Joe, and they got to work. Now, both men being designers, they knew how to put a website together faster than most people would. With their skill in hand, they decided to put up the spare rooms in their apartment for rent for the weekend. The only problem was they had 2 rooms, but no beds in them. Can't rent a room without a bed, can you? Nope. But getting beds meant spending a lot of money they didn't have. So they went with the next best thing: air mattresses. Air mattresses don't sound like the experience that one would want from a fun stay in San Francisco, but when there's a conference to attend, you can't find anywhere to sleep for the night. But that's still a little hard to advertise. So they thought of the idea that started it all: air bed and breakfast, plus a little tour of the city. That would mean that the guests would be able to have a homey bed and breakfast, even though it's an air mattress, but it would be paired with a tour of the city, something from the locals that would take the trip and make it an experience. It was the perfect plan, something that would help them and their guests at the same time. The idea was good enough that on that fateful night of the conference, they had not 1, but 3 guests. On that night alone, they made $80 per guest, all for basically just renting out an air mattress in their home. The home the men couldn't afford had shown the potential of being the one thing that helped make money: instant money. Soon after the conference and the initial launch, things went a little silent on airbedandbreakfast.com. They were trying to get it off the ground, but nothing was working. It was around this time that Brian and Joe asked their friend, Nathan Blakarczyk, an entrepreneur, to help take their idea from a one-hit wonder to something that worked. With them joining forces, they were ready to do anything to get their website to the level that they felt they could. Why wouldn't they? They experienced it working firsthand. It had potential. People just needed to understand it. But everyone they told about it would say that it was a terrible, overdone idea. Why would anyone go for Airbnb when they can just use sites like HomeAway.com, stuff that's been around for years? Well, Airbnb allowed everyone to not only earn from their platform, but with it created a market for people where there was none. The market of people that are left without options when all of the hotels in their destination are booked. Hotels use the demand and supply concept to drive their prices up. Throughout time, it's worked perfectly, because when people can't find a hotel, they're going to pay anything to get one, right? With Airbnbs, they wouldn't have to. All of that leftover demand can be absorbed by Airbnb. But even with that great idea, things didn't just go smoothly right away. The founders were struggling to get the finances sorted. They were being walked out on during meetings with angel investors. One potential investor even left mid-conversation and didn't even say goodbye. That's how much of a waste of time people thought the idea was. But they still believed. They still wanted to go on. So it meant that they were going to get crafty and creative and get this company the money it needed to get off the ground. As things got harder and harder, the founders got to a point when they started asking themselves when they would give up on the dream. But then, the dream came to them. The Democratic National Convention in Denver was underway, and with 20,000 people making their way over, the whole too many tourists, too little room situation was at it again. With that, Airbnb rose again. 600 people were renting out their space to guests. It was a massive drive up from where they had been before. But even then, after the convention, the demand dropped again. However, they had done one good thing during the time of the convention. They leaned into the breakfast part of their Air Bed and Breakfast and created their selling election-themed cereals. 2 out of 3 men were designers, so it's no surprise that they were thinking outside the cereal box. It was just them printing their custom boxes that were titled Obama O's and Captain McCain's, and, well, with it, they made national news. Everyone wanted to interview them. The boxes were flying off the website. While they did make $20,000 from the cereals, it was nothing but a marketing ploy. They had barely covered the cost for those, but they became the reason their names were on CNN.com. But like it had happened several times before, they hit yet another slump. After the election was over and the quirkiness of the cereals had died out, they were back to square one. Back to believing that they had something great on their hands with no real means to get it to their dream level. But then their advisor told them to look into the American technology startup accelerator, Y Combinator. And, well, after a lot of struggle, they made it. They got the funding they needed to get things going, even if it meant that they would only eat ramen and invest all of the rest into the business. But funding wasn't the only thing they got wisdom and guidance. They realized that it was better for them to have a few users that loved them than to have thousands that just liked them. This was something they honed in on. Because of the people guiding them from Y Combinator, they visited their most concentrated city, New York, and met the users in person. It was there that they realized some of the reasons why the Airbnbs weren't getting enough traction. Hosts were using low-res photos, the pricing was too high, or there wasn't enough information on their listings. The little things that you'd only see if you were paying attention. They began offering help to get the listings just right. Sometimes it would be free photos of the place, other times it would be editing the listings, anything that would attract more customers. And well, it worked. Eventually, people just couldn't resist going for Airbnb too, and well, from that point on, it was unstoppable. Today, Airbnb is a $67 billion company. People that started with just an idea and an air mattress and had to sell quirky cereal while living the ramen lifestyle managed to get their idea off the ground to sky-high levels of success. With it, they've pretty much become an inspiration for all entrepreneurs all over the world. And on that note, we'll wrap up today's video. What did you think about Airbnb's crazy story? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. We'll see you at the next one.